the last Scottish questions from the Secretary of State. We on these benches will miss him almost as much as his Scottish Labour colleagues will do. And if it is his swan song, when is he going to bring something to the table, anything to the table, that will help bring this constitutional logjam, an idea, a suggestion, a proposal? And here's a last question for him. If we are in a voluntary union, which they all say that we are, what is the means for Scotland to leave it?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to see the SNP are staying classy as usual. On the matter of personnel choices, I'm not sure my first go-to source would be the First Minister, because of course he appointed Peter Morrell to be the Chief Executive of the Scottish National Party. They don't like the answers when they ask the questions, Mr. Speaker. And in relation to their continuing obsession with independence, I would simply say this is a better time surely to focus on delivery. In May, nearly a third of patients waited more than the target 4 hours in Scotland in A&E, with a staggering 16,612 people waiting over 8 hours and 6,978 people waiting more than 12 hours. That is the worst time since records began. Their manifest failure on delivery, Mr. Speaker, really is the elephant in the room, or should I say, the camper van in the drive.
Patricia Ferguson, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Scottish Secretary will be aware that no NHS board in Scotland has met its target for starting cancer treatment within 62 days since 2012. That Public Health Scotland data shows that 1 in 7 Scots are on an NHS waiting list, and that Scottish Government's own figures show that home completions fell by 10% in the year to March. And don't even get me started on lifeline ferries to our islands. So does the Scottish Secretary agree with me that it's time for the SNP Scottish Government to start talking about delivery, acting on delivery, and to stop talking about division?
Mr. Speaker, the Chair of the Scottish Affairs Select Committee speaks with her characteristic wisdom and authority on these matters. It seems the only output that is rising on the SNP's watch is the number of statements being issued by solicitors on behalf of their high-profile clients.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't be overly effusive about the Secretary of State or the Minister, because it might not be helpful for them in the next few days. In a previous change of Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, as soon as Anna Soubry stood up and said that I had done a good job at the Scotland office, I knew I was doomed. But does the Secretary of State, will the Secretary of State make clear to the Right Honourable Member from Makerfield that devolution in itself is not an answer? It's how it's used. And we've seen that in Scotland, most recently, where the Scottish Parliament voted in favour of another independence referendum and against an inquiry into SNP finances.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if it will impair my prospects by paying generous tribute to the question and the wisdom thereof. Of course, devolution provides you with the tools, but one of the great tragedies of the last 2 decades in Scotland is whether it is the education system, where we used to be the envy of the world, whether it's the National Health Service, whether it's the capacity to build or operate ferries. All too often, Scotland's gone backwards on the SNP watch, and there's a pretty basic explanation. For them, government is simply a way station on the route to independence, so they're not interested in delivering truthfully for the people of Scotland.
Honourable Crichton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of how we divide on the referendum, I wonder if colleagues on the SNP benches will find it in their hearts to put political division aside at 8 o'clock tonight. I did, Mr. Speaker, I did not come of age. Mr. Speaker, I did not come of age in time for the 1966 World Cup finals, but the older boys in my primary school were all nicknamed after the England World Cup squad. So we had Nobby Stiles and Charlton in our Scottish playground. That's a Hebridean example of respect and rivalry. And does the Secretary of State agree with today's Daily Record editorial, which says there's always room for friendly rivalry with neighbouring nations, but bringing politics into football does no one...
So, come on, Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, there's a serious point to start the answer, which is I've always believed to be pro-Scottish. You don't need to be anti-English. We should be bigger and more generous than that. we're all immensely proud of Steve Clarke, of Andy Robertson and the achievement of getting to the World Cup. But I think we could look across the North Sea to Norway for a demonstration of grace in circumstances in which they left the tournament. Be assured, I wish our friends, our neighbours and our sometimes rivals well this evening at 8 o'clock.
Secretary of State Abdullah.
Mr Speaker, can I welcome the Secretary of State's reassurance on the Constitution? The people of Scotland do not want another divisive, distracting and damaging referendum on ripping our country apart. That being said, this Labour government do have a bit of a habit of changing position on certain issues, 25 U-turns in only 2 years. So can I ask the Secretary of State, whatever else changes, whoever else holds the keys to Dover House this time next week, will this be the one? And even if it is the only one, the one thing they stick to, no referendum, no consideration, will they dismiss out of hand immediately any move towards the breaking up of our United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Yes, Mr Speaker, ours is a politics of solidarity, of cooperation and togetherness. We had a manifesto commitment not only opposing independence but opposing a further referendum, and we stand by that mandate.
Susan Murray, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. 54% of Scots now back nuclear power, and the SNP tell them they can't have it. In May, over half of the Scots voted for 57% of the Scots voted for parties committed to the Union. Now, I know some parties might describe that as nearly 60%, but it's definitely a majority. But the SNP's answer, as we're hearing, appears to be another referendum. And there's a pattern where a majority of Scots disagree with the SNP decides the majority is wrong. So will the Secretary of State back the single transferable vote so that Scots get what Scots vote for?
Mr Speaker, it's now almost a matter of ancient history, but in the forgotten referendum that took place under the last Labour government, I was proud to campaign alongside her party's former leader, Charles Kennedy, in favour of the alternative vote. And in that sense, I think there are ways that we can improve the working of our democracy within the United Kingdom without separating and leaving ourselves from the United Kingdom.
Laura Baird.
Mr Speaker, can I welcome the honourable member to her place and congratulate her on a recent by-election victory. This government's focus is to make the existing devolution settlement work effectively. For too long we've watched centralisation of decision-making taking place at Holyrood, pulling powers away from local communities across Scotland. It's time that changed, and I would remind the SNP-led Scottish Government there's actually a nation outside of and beyond Holyrood. It's called Scotland.
Laura Baird.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Devolution appears to be all the rage at the moment, and the Secretary of State will know fine well that the Scottish Parliament recently voted to devolve energy powers back to Scotland. So in this new spirit of renewed cooperation and trust that we are apparently about to start to see, can I ask the Secretary of State when the UK government will respect the vote of the Scottish Parliament and devolve energy powers back to Scotland?
Mr Speaker, the SNP seem to respect every vote apart from the constitutional referendum in which 84% of the Scottish people exercised their democratic choice. She says that that devolution is all the rage. Some of us, with respect, were early adopters. I campaigned for, voted for and supported the Scotland Act in this House, arguing for a two-parliament solution to Scotland's effective governance. Energy policy is one of the areas of policy that is held here at Westminster, albeit there are important planning considerations in Westminster. But on the substantive point that the centralisation of powers in Holyrood needs to be reversed, I certainly do agree. The honourable lady seems to have no comment on that. She's obviously replicating the pattern of behaviour of a certain former First Minister.
Lillian Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. For 23 years I've proudly served in Scotland's NHS, working alongside dedicated, hard-working, brilliant nurses. Yet under the SNP government, those very nurses are paying higher income tax than colleagues anywhere else in the UK. Does the Secretary of State agree, instead of demanding more powers, the SNP government should use the powers they already have to concentrate on delivering better public services and better value for Scotland's taxpayer?
Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member, my honourable friend, for her question. I couldn't agree more. My own mother worked for many years in the NHS in Ayrshire at Crosshouse Hospital. The Scottish Government is, alas, letting those dedicated NHS workers down. After 19 years in power, it must account for its record on public services, from NHS waiting lists to declining school standards. We used to have an education system that was the envy of the world. The priority should be on delivery and not division.
Secretary of State Underbuck.
Mr. Speaker, we famously haven't heard very much from the Right Honourable Member from Makerfield and his plans for government, although we do know that he seems to be a fan of devolution and its job-creating opportunities for him. Well, I can tell colleagues from experience devolution ain't everything it's cracked up to be. In Scotland, we have had 20 years of SNP mismanagement and a pervasive and deeply damaging devolve and forget mentality in London. So can the Secretary of State confirm Labour will not be devolving any more power to Edinburgh?
Mr. Speaker, I hardly think that the mismanagement of the SNP that he rightfully describes should damn devolution in the eyes of everyone in this chamber. It is perfectly possible to drive a Ferrari into a ditch, which is pretty much what we've seen over the last 19 years.
And, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, we've demonstrated that we are unafraid to step in and act when decisions are being taken by the Scottish Government that are to the detriment of Scots and Scotland, with the Gender Recognition Act a few years ago. So will he today commit to urging the new Prime Minister to think long and hard about how devolution in the hands of the SNP is failing Scotland and Scotland's economy, and examine how, on this government's watch, SNP ministers have been able to jet around the world on taxpayer jollies, allowed British civil servants to drop plans to tear Britain apart, and spent countless hundreds of thousands pursuing a narrow, divisive agenda focused on pulling Scotland apart rather than growing it together?
Mr. Speaker, I think an awareness of all of those issues is not simply that for the incoming Prime Minister, but anybody who reads a newspaper in Scotland. It is a travesty of the potential of devolution, what we've witnessed, not simply the distraction of focusing on issues that are not devolved, but their abject failure in policy after policy area that is devolved. Ferries, hospitals, schools, the list goes on.
Question number 6, please.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, GBE Nuclear's technical study that was recently published confirms that Scotland possesses land areas with high potential for new nuclear development. Such projects could deliver significant investment and thousands of high-quality, unionised skills jobs. As a government, we remain open to discussions with the Scottish Government on deploying these technologies, both to boost Scotland's economic growth and energy security.
Irene Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. New nuclear in areas such as my constituency of North Ayrshire and Arran could bring much-needed skilled jobs and investment to the area. Yet again, Scotland is losing out. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the Scottish Government should review and consider its stance on nuclear, given the findings of the report by Great British Energy Nuclear, which shows the potential for new developments, including in Hunterston in my constituency?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, whether it's Hunterston in my honourable friend's constituency or indeed Torness in my own constituency, Scotland has a proud history of harnessing that civil nuclear power to bring jobs and growth to Scotland. Alas, the anti-scientific approach that the SNP have adopted of denying us that future of carbon-free energy is one that will also, unless it changes, deny us the high-skilled jobs and investment in North Ayrshire and Arran that is required, and indeed across Scotland.
John Lamont.
Mr. Speaker, many of my constituents work at Torness Power Station and are deeply disappointed that the SNP government are blocking new nuclear development in Scotland. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that the nuclear industry provides highly skilled jobs and it's a grave mistake by the SNP government to block them coming to Scotland?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on that there is cross-party consensus. I can attest to that as the constituency member of Parliament in Lothian East, where we've had decades of not just sustainable power that is carbon-free, but really high-quality jobs, excellent apprenticeships and stimulus to the local economy. I know of the contribution of his own constituents to the work in Torness. We want to see life beyond 2029-2030.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker. Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 7 and 12 together. City, region and growth deals are having a visible and transformative impact on regional economies across Scotland. Built on more than £1.5 billion of UK government investment, the deals play a vital role in fostering enduring economic growth,